Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you can hear me. Thank you so much for having me at this conference. I honestly must say that I feel like an intruder amongst so many outstanding academics, researchers, thinkers, because I'm an ordinary business person who does not have faintest of understanding of the world economy, let alone inequity that my good friend Dr. Aditya and Dr. Chaturvedi talked about. Thank you, Professor Mathur, Professor Naik, Professor Joanne Role for inviting me. Is delighted to join Birla Global University in my hometown, even though digitally. I must congratulate all of you as organizers for choosing such a timely and fantastic subject. Because my mind goes back to Philadelphia Declaration in 1944 when ILO was perhaps unveiled, which said, poverty anywhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. Now, Ajit talked about that poverty and inequity are not the same things, but I believe inequity itself is a kind of poverty in our thinking, in our existence, because we have not been able to solve a certain part of human problem. And why I say it is topical, not because inequity is new, but because the kind of inequity that pandemic has created. Many of you may have read about Oxfam's report on profiting from pain that was perhaps unveiled during the World Economic Forum of 2022. I cannot vouch for all the data, but I must quote a few data for you to understand why I call your topic so timely. Apparently, world billionaires control 14% of world GDP. Apparently, the top 10 richest people in the world together hold more wealth than 3.1 billion people in this world. Apparently, of course, it shouldn't surprise you that every 30 hours in the world, 1 billionaire gets added and 1 million new poor people get added to world population. And it may not surprise you if I tell you that we have suffered health crisis, food crisis, energy crisis. During the pandemic, the world added in the 2 years 573 billionaires, of whom 62 were food sector billionaires and 40 were from pharma sector billionaires. Now, I have no quarrel with private capital. I work for one. I benefit from it. But the challenge before us as human beings, as Ajit, as Professor Chaturvedi, Professor Joanne Role said, can we peacefully sleep at night as if nothing is happening around us, life is as usual, when we find this magnitude of challenge that is before us? Mahatma Gandhi, our father of nation, talked about Sarvodaya, everybody moving forward together. Our current Prime Minister talks about Sabka Saath, Sabka Vishwas, trying to carry everybody along. And when you think about all of this, equity to me has two implications at macroeconomic policy. One is, are we able to create equal access to opportunities for everybody? That is one part of equity. And the second part of equity is, whatever economic policies we adopt, do they create equitable impact for everyone or disproportionately benefit some sections of society or the other? And if we look back, we had this great Occupy Wall Street movement in 2011, where there was a very popular slogan that was coined, where people gathered and said, we are the 99%. And thereby they referred to that the 1%, wealthy and rich, the benefited, are different people, and the rest of them belong to the 99% who did not have. In the last 5 decades alone, that the real wages in the United States, one of the most developed economy, has grown at the rate of less than 1%, below the rate of productivity growth in the United States. And of course, the share of wages in GDP has constantly reduced in the world GDP over the last several decades. Ajit referred to rightly that inequity is not just about money, wealth, it's about opportunities for gender, marginalized groups of society. Today, we find a digital divide. That also is a form of inequity about access to opportunities. The many parts of the world, India in particular, also Northeast, had got left out of the benefits of development and freedom for a long time. Until recently, we are trying to integrate them into the mainstream of India. That has been the case about the inner city people in UK or in US and different parts of large cities. When we look at large economic shocks of the kind that we have gone through in the last couple of years, pandemic and other places, as Professor Joan Rolle talked about, economic stimulus was provided by the wealthy countries. They provided 10 to 12% of their GDP as economic stimulus. Others who did not have money could not provide similar kind of succor, similar kind of support to their own citizens. That sense of helplessness, not to be able to support your citizens at a time of crisis, is the tremendous sense of inequity that perhaps societies and government suffer. But look at that stimulus. What has it done? Ironically, today's inflation, high interest rate, all of that are attributed to the stimulus that was provided, and the high interest rate and the inflation have come back today to again impact the marginalized in society, creating further inequity in this new world. We went through a pandemic through the vaccine crisis, and we debated that some countries, some developed nations cornered the bulk of the vaccines, 5-6 times more than they required, whereas others were scrambling around, negotiating, appealing, cajoling, persuading, pleading to be given vaccines. The inequity of helplessness, the desire to achieve something. I talked about the digital divide. Oxfam's one report talks about that during pandemic, 270 million Indian children suffered on account of education because poor people did not have access to laptops or digital access to have classrooms or education. Again, another form of inequity, whose source may be in poverty, whose source may be in income inequity, but digital divide and inequality, we talk about net neutrality, who runs, etc. All of these have become challenges in the world in the form of inequity that we need to talk about. We see that the world is getting more and more polarized between ideologies, between power blocks, between national interests. My concern and worry is that the more and more we get polarized, the less and less will be our ability to come together to eradicate this inequity that we are gathered here to talk about. Of course, the quest of economic equity often has led us to create welfareism. That has created a debate in India today about freebies, how much government should be giving free to people to support so-called weaker sections. I am not against welfareism. The concern we have to think about that by trying to support through unbridled welfareism with a strategy of spray and pray, we do not rob the future generations of their prosperity and create greater inequality in the future. So how do we manage our desire and heartfelt concern for the marginalized society by having more targeted welfare? Seeing that the delivery mechanism is appropriately handled, our direct benefit transfer to Indian accounts of marginalized people has been well appreciated by many people in India and globally that we have done the right things. Ajit referred to a very interesting subject. Another form of inequity developing in form of powerful corporations in the world. The new models of business, the e-commerce that is emerging. Some are kind of using technology to disintermediate, eliminate the middle persons, which is good, could create value for consumers. But at the same time, it is depriving consumers of healthy competition, access to better pricing, access to opportunity, and may land up creating greater monopolies. We also talked about the inequity in the green debate. World climate change is real. We must all come together to fight it. Question is, who pays for it? How much? In what time frame? Suddenly today in the world climate order, we found that developing countries, emerging markets are expected to carry an undue amount of burden of reducing carbon dioxide and contributing to climate improvement. We must play our fair share. We must do the right things. But at the same time, we must understand that all development cannot stop in this part of the world as a contribution to the climate improvement. The Honorable Supreme Court of India, in a recent judgment led by a bench by Justice Chandrachud, those of you who may have read, in a very interesting judgment about the coastal road in Mumbai, talked about the fact that all development cannot stop simply because it has an adverse consequence for climate. We've got to perhaps find other solutions for it. And I think in that greater context, what a fantastic thing the Birla Global University in Bhubaneswar and the City University of New York have come together, brought you all together to do, is to create a platform for dialogue between economists, policymakers, corporates, researchers, thinkers, to figure out what can be done. Everything is not gloomy to me. I believe that we have experimented with many different models. Movements like Black Lives Matter, movements like the Black Economic Empowerment Program in South Africa, the affirmative action that we have done in India, the entire concept that perhaps Ajit talked about and Professor Chaturvedi talked about and Professor Naik talked about corporates altering their lens to say, we are not here for shareholder capitalism, we're here for stakeholder capitalism, which means creating an inclusive society, paying equal attention to decision-making process as to how decision-making is likely to impact different stakeholders, a new reporting mechanism on global corporates' performance, investors being very conscious about it. All of this together are contributing to help us find a different solution to this very significant problem. IFC report talks about impact investing. Almost 2.3 trillion investment has gone into social enterprises, which amount to about 2% of assets that are being managed in the world. And these are going into social enterprises as social impacting. And of course, the new technology that are coming to improve urban living, create smart cities, green energy, waste recycling. And I believe all of these breakthroughs, etc., will hopefully empower our people to kind of address this problem with inequity. Professor Naik asked two questions. What should be done to rehumanize the workplace? I think the workplace is an imaginary fiction unless the people element of there is kept alive. Ajit rightly appealed to the students studying at the Birla Global University, and for that matter, students anywhere who have joined on this digital platform, that as citizens of the future, we have a responsibility to behave more responsibly and retain that humanness in us, because our predecessors, our forefathers, our previous generations, they contributed, sacrificed to make our lives better. And we need to take that burden of history, the responsibility for today and tomorrow, to make sure that we make our fair contribution. Conspicuous consumption perhaps accelerates inequity. Responsible consumption might be one way for us to avoid catastrophe. And lastly, Professor Naik asked the question, what should the leader's role be? I believe leaders' role are only twofold. Have the courage to confront the truth, to speak the truth, raise uncomfortable questions as you are doing in this conference and seminar. And number two, have the authenticity and humility to set an example as a leader as to how you are willing to contribute. With these words, I'm happy that this program has come to take shape. I'm sure you will have fantastic 2 days conversation. I wish I had the time to be physically with you or digitally with you to listen to every word, every sentence, every idea, every thought that you're going to explore there. I thank you again for inviting me, and I wish all conference participants and speakers a fantastic 2-day event. Thank you so much.